So our next speaker for today. So he has more than 20 years of experience in primarily in security, networking. He is also a cloud organizer of GDG Cloud Bangalore. He is a speaker at multiple domestic and international festivals. So with a huge round of applause, can I please have Runcy Oommen on stage, please?
All right, so after that super fun session, back to a deep technical session. Thanks again for having me for GDG Cloud Bangalore, for GDG Cloud Gandhinagar. And I am originally organizer for GDG Cloud Bangalore. My name is Runcy, and I'm the guy who is standing between you and lunch. Right? So, and we are talking about security, a very, very interesting and sleepy topic. So, but I try to keep it a little interesting, and that's the whole agenda. So what we are going to be looking at, and I see that most of them are students, so probably it could be a little deep dive, but I try to make it as fun and interactive for everybody. So I didn't want to do this to be a monologue. So what we are probably looking at is the security enhancements or posture improvements for GCP. And this is sort of like my promise for the next 30, 40 minutes, whatever we have. We're going to get kick-started with what the generic cloud security info, and I've been fortunate that the tempo has been already set in the morning keynote with some of the terms and technologies already there. Then we're going to probably look at the shared responsibility model, and then the meat of my presentation where I'm going to be looking at 7 or 8 services from GCP for specific security enhancements. All right? So before that, a little bit about me. I've been in the industry for quite some time, primarily an interest in systems, cloud, and security. A huge fan of serverless. And on the community side, I'm organizer for GDG Cloud Bangalore, a former organizer of AWS user group. I've participated in multiple hackathons and won around security, and also been recognized as a Google for a community influencer. So that's about me. So let's get started with a 10,000 feet overview of what a cloud security is. And all of you can read, and I'm not going to repeat that. This is a thing that I've took from Wikipedia. And look at the ones which are italicized, right? A cloud security probably means policies, technologies, and applications which are used to protect your IP, data, applications, and services. I'm sort of like oversimplifying, but this is actually what it is, right? And you know, when I was looking at the agenda, the organizers put me in a very difficult spot. There was a fun session before, and there was a lunch after. So I had to get creative. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be doing a Pictionary. And Pictionary is basically you try to draw something on the board, but we don't have a board here. So I've put certain pictures of Google Cloud Services, which will probably come up along the course of the presentation. And whoever stands up and shouts what that service is, I'm going to give away a few awesome goodies. OK? So it's a Bluetooth-controlled selfie remote for your phone. OK? And I've got 5 of them. And with that, let's get started. So hope all of you are excited, right? OK, the lunch is still pending. I get that. Yeah. So with that, let's go through the sentence, right? The IT infrastructure has got sort of like a huge paradigm shift. What that actually means is, when I joined the industry, this is the architecture diagram that the IT person gave to me. The big bad world of internet protected by a firewall, which is basically letting through the good traffic and blocking the bad traffic for the glass house, which is the corporate, right? That's sort of like the traditional view. But now, we got everything on the cloud. CAS, PaaS, DaaS, FaaS, like whatever as, right? It's all up there in the cloud. The glasshouse is still there. So if this is the sort of stuff that is there, shouldn't you be also thinking the security a little differently? Right? The traditional methods of using NACLs or IP whitelisting or port enabling could probably not work for this modern workload, right? So the security of your cloud should also be reimagined. So to understand that, you have to understand what are the important facets of a cloud. A cloud is ubiquitous. It's always reachable anywhere, anytime, right? It's also scalable. We heard about serverless sessions. You can push your infrastructure at scale at a push of a button with dynamic scaling and all of that, right? And it's deeply integrated into your workload. There is no distinction whether if it is an on-premise versus a cloud or sort of like, it's tightly internet right now. So, Pictionary time. Stand up and shout. Okay, that's right. Google Kubernetes Engine, the guy in the back. Come on. Run.
Also, no volunteers, huh? Volunteers are not supposed to participate in this. उनको पता है answers.
Bye. All right, so that's the Google Kubernetes engine. And now, let's look at the shared security model, right? This is sort of like an important thing that you have to understand when you operate in the cloud. And there are two aspects: the security of the cloud and security in the cloud. So what does that mean? Security of the cloud is something that your cloud service provider's responsibility. That is, your data center is well protected. Within the data center, you use like a Cat6 cabling to prevent eavesdropping. That is Google's responsibility, or AWS or Azure or whatever. But there is something called security in the cloud. That is, whenever you put something or you have a workload, whether you use the right certificate, whether you have an appropriate only number of ports open, whether you have the proper access control list, that is your responsibility. Google has, or AWS has, no say in that. So that is something called as a shared responsibility one. And this is very important to understand as you migrate your workloads to the cloud, right? So with that base set, we're going to harden some of the GCP services. And this is an analogy that I've taken. This is the castle that you see is an old, broken old castle, which is the current state of your GCP account, right? So when you provision your GCP account, you get your $300. This is how it looks like. If you deploy anything, it's really possible that you might get hacked. Okay? So with that, we're going to harden it. And the first thing that we are going to be doing is, and I'm going to read it, prevent the IAM users from being assigned these two roles. That is the service account user or service account token creator. What does it mean? Right? So service account are special accounts. So there is the normal user like me and you, and then there are service accounts who've got extra privileges. Now, if you give these two roles to an IAM user, that is you and me, who's using the Google Cloud, then what it could mean is, it could lead to elevation of privileges, and it could also mean that any new account that's getting created gets automatically delegated. So what we have to do to prevent it? You go to the IAM page, you filter out for these roles, and then click on remove access. So this way, your IAM user does not have these two roles associated. Only the service accounts have these two roles. So that's hardening number one. Number two, audit the environment variables of cloud functions. We heard about cloud functions, the serverless stuff, right? And instead of that, storing the environment variables in cloud functions, you should store them in secrets manager, right? So this is basically the introduction. Cloud functions are the serverless offerings from Google, and you would have to use the environment variables because not everything have to be written with the program. There could be dynamic variables. But instead of hard coding it, you should store them in a service called a secrets manager, which is the most secure way to access them. But there is a cost implication. That is, if you hit 10,000 requests, then you might get a little charged. So how do you do it? You go into the GCF page, that is a Google Cloud Function page, look at all your functions, click on it, and then under the variables, make sure that there are no runtime environment variables and build environment variables. If there are, just remove them and migrate them into the secrets manager. Who said that? Yeah. Come out. No, Elastic Cloud. Here, I'll throw it. Catch. Oh. Okay. So number 3, the Google Cloud Shell, right? The Google Cloud Shell is a service that you get along with your Google account. That is, you get that console and everything. So now the default Google Cloud Shell comes up with OpenSSH 8.9, a really, really old one. And that's susceptible to multiple CVEs or vulnerabilities that we heard in the keynotes today, right? So what's the solution? You got to upgrade it. And how do you upgrade? The Google Cloud Shell is a Debian-based system. So you issue this command, apt-get update. Natural process, which you should update, hopefully. But guess what? If you do a version again, it doesn't update. It still shows 8.9. So there is something definitely wrong. So which means the Google Cloud Shell package manager does not even have a higher version of SSH. That is, if you go and then list the list of package managers under that, there is no version, there is no mention of SSH over here. So if you do an apt-get update, nothing happens. Right? So what do? You got to install the dependencies, you got to compile them, make them from source and all of that. But worry not, I got your back. And how you do that is I've written this simple shell script, which is basically going to do that thing for you. So you just have to copy that shell script from my GitHub profile and then just get it, and it will install the GCC, the libSSL, download the OpenSSH version, and then it will probably upgrade it into 9.8. Success. That's one vulnerability less of your Google Cloud. Okay? 4th one. Wow, there are so many. I don't think if Google is basically listening to this, hopefully. But anyway, the cloud audit logs are configured properly. So cloud audit logs are basically functions where, it's a service where you can put all your logs and everything. So there are 2 main broad categories for cloud audit logs, which is basically the admin activity and the data access, right? So now, as the name suggests, whatever action that you do when you are an admin within the console, that's maintained as part of the admin. And then the API requests are basically tracked as part of the data access. By default, both of them are not enabled. So what you have to do is you go into the cloud audit logs page, and you have to enable this. You have to enable admin read, data read, and data write. So this way, if there are any breach, or if there is a malicious user, which is probably within your organization or a ROG user, you get to exactly know what actually happened. You get to track all of them, right? And to make sure there are no exceptions. Everyone should be basically get logged, right? Everyone who's got access to the console. Next up. No? This is a tough one. Huh? No. Very close. No. Cloud? No. Looks like I'm taking that thing back to me. What? No. Yeah, there you go. Cloud data fusion. I thought for a moment I'm going to take that selfie thing back. But anyway, people are smart. That's good. And I didn't want to put a data. I just intentionally put the binary. But good. No. All right. Number 5. You got to enable the retention policies using bucket lock for storage buckets that contains logs. So now we heard about the Google Cloud Storage in one of the previous session. You could also use the Google Cloud Storage as sort of like a place for storing your logs. But if you store logs, you got to take some extra steps in making sure that the logs are not inadvertently deleted, or there isn't a malicious actor who is going to delete these log files, right? So what you have to do is you have to set something called as a retention policy. And what you have to do is you have to lock a bucket. But bear in mind that locking a bucket is irreversible. Once you lock it, to delete all of those data, the data has to go through that retention policy. So let me explain what it means, right? So you go into the bucket and you set a required retention period. It could be anywhere from few seconds to few years. In this example, I've set a 30 days. So what it means is any object within that bucket would be there for close to 30 days, and you cannot delete it. You can only delete it after 30 days. Right? It could be anything. And after that, you will see a lock option. So a bucket that has got a retention policy would have a lock, which means, and this is only needed for if your bucket is used as a log sink, right, for storing logs. So this is a very added precautionary measure to make sure that your data is never corrupted. Okay, the number 6. So there is the cloud DNS, which is basically the hosted DNS controller, and you have to make sure that the DNSSEC is basically enabled. So that's a setting. So what it actually means is it adds security to your domains to prevent a domain hijacking or any malicious routing or all of those. And it prevents the attackers from issuing fake DNS requests. So by default, the DNSSEC for any of your hosted settings is turned off. So what you have to do is you go into the cloud DNS page and you have to set it on. Right? So for any public zone, you make sure that it is set to on. So this will prevent that if there is a domain called runcy.me, it is not redirected into a malicious malicious server. Right? Only it's going to my server, not to anybody else. No. 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 Container? No. Ah, there you go. Container registry. Come over. Hey, thank you so much. All right, so we're getting getting to the fag end of the presentation. So number 7. So you got to implement uniform bucket level access on cloud storage buckets, right? So what it actually means is there are 2 ways that you could grant access to a cloud storage bucket. You could either use an ACL, or you could also use something called as a IAM level permission for granting it. Now, both of these could work in parallel and it could override. So what you should do is you should make sure that there is one uniform system for granting access to your buckets. But there are some services which I have called out over here which would fail to export your data into the cloud bucket if this setting is turned on. So that's just something to keep in mind, but otherwise, this is a pretty good hardening technique that you could use for your Google Cloud Storage bucket. So what you do is you switch into the cloud storage browser, and then under the permissions for access control, you just switch to uniform. So this will make sure that there are no exclusive or mutually exclusive bucket policies that are present, and there's just one uniform way of doing that. Right? And in the pop-up, you just select it as uniform. All right, the last one. So for Cloud SQL, there are these flags which would basically make it much more secure. And this is probably applicable only for MySQL instances which are running in Cloud SQL. So what it means is, there is this command called show databases, right? Show DBs or whatever. It will basically list all your databases. So if you set this, and if somebody gets an access in your databases, they will not be able to issue the show DBs command. They will not be able to see the other databases. And similarly, setting the other flag would basically prevent loading your local data into the database. So if your client or a hacker has connected in your database, and there are a lot of malicious data that is local to that system, he will not be able to upload that into the database. So your server is always protected. So this will basically make sure that the local in flag has to be set to off. Again, go into the Cloud SQL instance, and then make sure that this flag is basically set as per your requirement. So with that, the hardening is successful. Okay? Thank you. But we are not done yet. Oh, GDG Cloud Gandhinagar. All right, thanks for listening. So I'm open to any questions. Oh, cool.